commemorate the Memorial Day of the Circassian genocide and deportation. My name is David Shogun, and I'm 7th generation survivor of the Circassian genocide. I often try to imagine what Zanfa Hussein, my great-great-great-father, felt like when he witnessed the destruction of his nation and the tearing apart of his country. By the time he arrived to the shores of Shacha, now what we know as the city of Sochi, he witnessed death by the thousands and the burning of the cities by the hundreds. I try to imagine what he felt like when he lost many of his friends and family members in the last cold winter of Circassia, and how many more he lost in the crowded boats in his way to the Ottoman Empire. 14 years after he was deported from his beloved homeland to the Balkans, still dreaming to go back, he was forced to live again and to land on the shores of Palestine. This man, together with a small group of survivors, founded later what we know as the village of Farkama, one of the two Circassian villages in Israel. From that moment on, all the efforts of these people were turned into their immediate survival and adaptation to the new and unfamiliar environment. The dominant narrative that prevailed in our small village till the 1990s was of a long bloody war against the Russians by fearless Circassian warriors who heroically sacrificed their lives for the survival of their nation. Nobody talked about genocide, nobody mentioned the massacre of women and children, and nobody talked about the devastation of one of the greatest nations that walk on the face of this earth. Their nation will survive, they figured, as long as they will keep their tradition and the language alive, and as long as they will keep on dreaming to return back to their lost heaven. But their lost heaven has been lost forever. The real history of the Circassian nation was unknown, or rather untold, until recently. Most of those who studied it were Russian researchers who did everything to justify the conquest of Circassia and the Caucasus. These so-called historians told a partial and one-sided story or one-sided reality from the tragedy of my people. The reality of the Circassians, however, was a continuous state of wars for survival. For centuries, the Circassians fought to protect their freedom and their simple way of life. The last war officially began in the year 1763, when the Russians started to conquer the lands, and it continues till this very day. The first stage lasted more than 100 years, in which the Russians raped, burned, plundered, and destroyed Circassia part by part. And in 1864, Circassia was no longer existed. In the second stage, the Russians intentionally murdered millions of my people and deported 90% from the surviving population to the mercies of the Black Sea. This was indeed one of the worst genocides in human history. The last stage of this war continues till today, in forms of politicide and ethnocide. While the Circassians are fighting for their last chance to preserve themselves as a nation, Russia doing everything she can to erase the traces of Circassian presence in the Caucasus. Circassian activists and human rights reporters die in mysterious ways. Circassian language and culture are being pushed in by the dominant Russian, and any call for Circassian patriotism is labeled as a danger for the public safety at best, or as extremism or terrorism at worst. The city Shacha, that was once the capital of Circassia, is being presented now as a Russian jewel, not even part of the Caucasus. And it's now a venue for the Olympic of Peace and Harmony. It will If we will look upon this issue in a simple way, we will see that there are three stages for achieving a goal: the making of a plan, the execution of a plan, and then the preservation of the achievements by all the means you have. The final stage in the reality of the current Russian policy means elimination of all the traces of the Circassians in the area, pushing for assimilation and dissolving the Circassians to the other nations surrounding them. The loss of their identity will suppress in advance any national aspirations. But this clever plan doesn't take into account the human nature and the instinct of survival. And there is no doubt today that the Circassians reached to a point where they are fighting for their survival as a nation. If we will examine some aspects of this situation in the Circassian community today, we will get the true picture of the Circassian reality, a reality of fading nation and awakening people. In Turkey, we have the largest Circassian community in the world. The estimations for their numbers range from 3 to 6 million people in 2,000 villages and cities. That fact alone shows us how spread and divided they are. For years they couldn't talk even Circassian, and thanks to Kemalism they couldn't teach Circassian language or use their Circassian family names. The Circassians in Jordan, who probably made the best adaptation for their new surrounding, still don't have the total freedom to deal with Circassian aspirations. And we all know about the situation of the Circassians in Syria. The Circassian community in Syria is not the first community who faced such a catastrophe, and because the Circassians are living under so many foreign regimes, probably it won't be the last. I would like to use this opportunity and call the leaders of the world to help not only our Circassian brothers in Syria, but all of those who are in unbelievable situation where every minute might be their last. The members of the Circassian community in Israel, the so-called the most preserved Circassian community in diaspora, and I can tell you that it's really so called because I live there and I see the decline and the loss of the language in our community as well. We kept our language and our tradition by chance. We were a small village and we were able to keep our traditions, but it won't be like that all the time. And the same is the Circassian communities in Europe and United States. We are all fading. The second largest community and one of the most important for the Circassians are the Circassians in the Caucasus. But the term community is rather misleading when we talk about less than 1 million Circassians who are divided in 3 separated republics. We always think about these ones. We always think about them as those who live in the homeland, but we forget that actually it's a territory controlled by Russia, and the loss of the Circassian identity is not spread from them as well. Not too long ago, UNESCO's Atlas of Languages in Danger has mentioned the Circassian language as one of the languages in vulnerable state. And in the last few years, we have seen many plans from the Russians aiming to further assimilate our people and keep a majority of ethnic Russians in their territories. Generally, I'm not so fond of deterministic statements, but history proves us that every nation that wants to survive as a nation must do so in a free, independent homeland. Therefore, the only solution for the Circassian is a free Circassia. A few years ago, it might have been a revolutionary idea, but more and more people realize that it's the only solution for the survival of the Circassian. So we are here today not only to remember the horrible genocide of my people, but we are here to remind that the Circassian nation still exists and our fight is still not over. In every Circassian community in the world, they commemorate this 21st of May as a day to remember and not to forget.